One of the great lessons in the Bible is contained in Psalm 119. So Psalm 119 verse 83 in the King James Version reads this: "For I am become like a bottle in the smoke, yet I do not forget thy statutes." I've become like a bottle in the smoke, yet I don't forget thy statutes. What's this verse talking about, and why is it so important to you and me? We're going to look at two things. We're going to look at the word bottle, and we're going to look at why it's in the smoke, because both of these are really important. First of all, when the King James Version used bottle, that's perhaps misleading, particularly to our generation today. The ESV, the English Standard Version, which is also quite a literal version of the Bible, reads this way: "For I have become like a wineskin in the smoke, yet have I not forgotten your statutes." I've become like a wineskin in the smoke, perhaps even better, skin bottle. And to understand this, we have to understand how they made bottles or what they called bottles. Frankly, the translation bottle is probably a little misleading. For example, if we go to Judges chapter 4 and verse 19, and this is Judges 4 is Deborah and Barak were fighting the Canaanites, and the Canaanite general Sisera was running away, and he came to came to the tent of the Kenites, and Heber the Kenite was gone, so he went to the tent, and Jael was there. And in the King James Version it says, "And he, Sisera, the Canaanite general, said to her, Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, Give me, I pray thee, a little water to drink, for I am thirsty." And it says, "And she opened a bottle of milk and gave him to drink and cover him." Now I can tell you, when I'm reading this to my children, if I were reading out of the King James and she opened a bottle of milk, they'd say, "Oh yeah, I get that. Yep, here's one. Just grab this old bottle of milk, just open that baby up and pour Sisera out some milk." But they didn't have refrigerators in the biblical world, and they didn't have bottles. They didn't have these plastic guys. They didn't even have the glass ones, and they didn't keep their milk in clay jugs. They kept their milk and their wine and often their water in skin bottles. The bottles they would make, or the wine skins or the skin containers that they would make from animal skins. And of course, that's what the ESV reads. It says, she opened a skin of milk. And the way that the skins were made, skin bottles were made in the biblical world, here you have an animal. Let's take a goat. Oftentimes the skin of a goat was used for a skin bottle. And they'd kill the goat, and they'd cut off its head very close to the head, so they have the full neck of the goat, and that's what they'd be able to tie a rope around to keep the bottle from opening. And then what they would do, and this required a lot of work, is they would take the animal apart, if you will, through the neck hole. They would push all of the animal, all of his bones, everything. They wouldn't make any cuts in the skin at all. But they would push all of the animal, meat, bone, viscera, all up through the hole of the neck and turn the animal inside out, so you have just the skin of the animal with no puncture holes. Then they would take the legs, and sometimes they would fold them over with bitumen, or just fold them over a few times and sew them. Sometimes they would take them and stretch the leg and then tie it in a knot, which would then dry and become waterproof. And then they would sew the anus closed. They would fold the skin up tight and sew that closed. And then you could pour whatever drink there was down the neck, and the skin would be watertight, and they would hold the fluid that way, and that was called a skin bottle. And wine was put in the skin bottle, milk was put in the skin bottle. And remember, when you're talking about milk in the Near East, it's only fresh for a couple hours. It's very hot. It's only fresh for a couple hours. After that, it would become what we would call sour milk, and they would add salt and stuff like that, and actually it would be closer to soured milk or cheese, some types of cheese, and that's what they would have to drink. By the way, the same was true with wine. When you get grape juice in the Middle East, and of course the grape harvest is in Usually in July is the grape harvest, and of course it's really hot. It's really hot in the Middle East in July, and so you only had grape juice at best for a couple days, and that's why both in Hebrew and in Greek, the word for grape juice and the word for wine are the same word, because really, you squeeze this grape and you've got juice, and 2 days later you're either going to have wine or vinegar or rotten grape juice. So that's, but they would put that in the wine in the skin bottle. And of course, if it was new wine and had to ferment, then it's going to put pressure on the skin bottle. And Christ brings that up in the Gospels. In Matthew chapter 9, verse 17, he says, "Neither is new wine put into old wineskins. If it is, the skins burst, and the wine is spilled, and the skins are destroyed. But new wine is put in fresh wineskins." Animal skins that are new. And so both are preserved. Because if you put the new wine in the new skin, then as it expands, as the wine expands, then the skin's going to stretch with it. And I know that I've often thought about, surely that skin has to impart a flavor to the water, to the milk, to the wine, and it did. And they just got used to it. It's one of those cultural things that I'm sure that if we had people from the Near East that were eating at our table, there'd be certain fruits or vegetables or drinks that they just go, look, how do you do that? And I'm sure that if you drank water that had been sitting for a few days inside an animal skin and had gotten some of that taste, you would be kind of going, look, how do you put up with this? But it's something that they got used to. It was part of their culture. So these were the animal skins, and what with the skin bottles, and what would happen over time is they would become less flexible, they would become dry, they would become wrinkly, and a person would have a few of them, just because you never know when you're going to want to make a trip and you're going to need extra wineskins or something, and then they would hang those up in the pegs of their house or hang them up off a tent stake. And now we get to the part about the smoke. Because in the houses of the Middle East, remember, they didn't have fireplaces with chimneys. That is an invention, a later invention in the West. You go to an Eastern house, they don't have a chimney, they don't have a fireplace. They built a fire in the middle of their house. And so as a result, what was up at top was up high toward the roof was always smoky and always hot. And so the wine skins that weren't used very often, they were hung up, and over time they became dry, wrinkly, forgotten, smoke-covered, soot-covered. They're up there in the smoke, forgotten, wrinkly, probably aren't going to be used again. And that's a wineskin in the smoke. And what a wonderful expression for a person. Have you ever felt forgotten by God? Have you ever had so many things seem to go wrong in your life all at one time that you just wonder if God's even there? And what does that do? How does it do to your prayer life? What's it do to your Bible study life? Does it inspire you to go to fellowship when things are like that? When you're going through one of those dark times, part of the desert of the soul? What an inspiring verse that here's the psalmist that says, there are times in my life that I'm like a wineskin in the smoke. I'm feeling old, wrinkled, forgotten, not cared about. I'm up there with the smoke and the soot. Nobody's paid attention to me. Doesn't even seem like God's in my life. But he says, you know what? I'm not going to forget your statutes. That comes from the heart. There's a true person whose heart is to serve God and to love God. What a great lesson from the biblical world. If I've become like a wineskin in the smoke, I have not forgotten your statutes. God doesn't leave us. There are times that we may think he does, but he never does. Let's not forget his statutes. It's when times are darkest that we need to be our best for him. He will show up, I guarantee it.